What's good? What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Urban Platform Speaks. Make sure to like and subscribe as you come into the channel and check out the content. And with that being said, I want to speak on a recent article that I came across where Magic Johnson was giving Larry Bird his props, for the great player that Larry Bird was when he played in the NBA, and the respect that they have for each other on and off the court is still going on to this very day, right? And so both of these guys, Magic and Larry Bird, in my opinion, they'll always be, forever connected. Even from and it started back in college when Magic was at Michigan State and Indiana, and well, he was at Indiana Tech or something like that. I forgot, but I know it wasn't Indiana, but he was at Indiana. I think it was Indiana Tech. Right, and their rivalry started back then in the late 70s. And they probably had immediate respect for each other just from the jump. But Magic recently did an interview where he just said that, Larry Bird was the only white player that people, that like black people talked about in the barbershops. And Larry Bird, I would have to push back on that. Larry Bird had a lot of respect from everybody, and he was on a different level than a lot of other basketball players in the league, black and white. But I remember being in barbershops. This was around the time when I had hair, and we talked about a lot. Everybody. But like I said, Larry Bird, not to like put everybody, these guys on Larry Bird level, but it was a lot. It was some white guys in the league that I followed at the time. This was like in the late 70s and the earlys when I was starting to get into basketball. Some guys that out there that was bad. But let me go here. I'm gonna play the audio from what Magic Johnson said, and then I'm gonna give my reaction. So here we go.
Did you know that Magic Johnson once said Larry Bird was the only white player that was talked about in black barbershops? Well, according to Magic, Bird actually had black America's respect. And Magic shared his take on this phenomenon as he said, his game, you see, Larry Bird was the only white guy that was mentioned in the barbershop, because that's where all the talking in our community is, the barbershop or on the playground. Now, the great white hope had earned serious props for his skills, basketball IQ, and killer instinct back in the day. And Magic even admitted Bird was the only player he truly feared. Despite lacking elite athleticism, Bird's fundamentals, relentless work ethic, and cold-blooded clutch plays cemented his legacy among the game's all-time greats. And yes, everyone, and we mean everyone, respected him.
All right, so that's true. I mean, Larry Bird, like I said, Larry Bird just had a lot of respect, because he won. He not only was he good, but he was the leader of the Boston Celtics. Like everything ran through Larry Bird, and he won. But like I said, you had so many. Like I remember watching. I follow Mark Price. Mark Price not on Larry Bird level, so I don't want people to be getting my. But Mark Price was a bad dude. I followed Mark Price from Georgia Tech when his days at Georgia Tech. He was doing his thing at Georgia Tech. Then he was at Cleveland, and he was there for when they had those big battles against Chicago Bulls early on in Michael Jordan's career. Mark Price was a bad dude. Tom Chambers was another dude that was bad. I mean, Tom Chambers, I was like 6'9" and could jump out the gym. Tom Chambers to me was almost like a white version of what's the guy named Shawn Kemp. He didn't do the fancy dunks like Shawn Kemp, but he got up. Tom Chambers, that he was just mean. He got up out to the rafters. Tom Chambers was bad. This Philadelphia 76ers on their championship team, they had Bobby Jones. Again, Bobby Jones wasn't as nice as Bird, but Bobby Jones was a bad dude too. I forgot. I think what was his Bobby Jones nickname? I think Bobby Jones' nickname. I think they used to call him Mr. President, right? Because he was a clean cut dude. He looked like a clean cut dude that couldn't really ball, but he was bad. Bobby Jones was bad. most people know about Kurt Rambis. Kurt Rambis was a tough dude for the Lakers, in those years, and Kurt Rambis played a big part in the success of the uh of the Lakers. Who else was bad back then, man? You know, and so, but the point I'm trying to make is like none of these guys is like Bird. And the thing about Bird is not that, like you got black people or black guys who couldn't mess with Bird. So it didn't matter that Bird was white. Bird was just a bad dude, right? Um and like I said, man, it just was a lot of good basketball players out there. And the thing about what people in the hood respect about basketball, like if you can play, you can play. They don't care if where you come from. If you can play, that's where the props come in. That's where the respect come in at. And so Larry was on a different level than the guys that I named, but he wasn't the only one, that we spoke about in barbershops during those days. He wasn't the only one who garnered respect around the league. Man, it just was some bad dudes out there that'll give you that work. So if you get out there on the court and you think that just because these guys are white guys that they're not gonna give you that work, you get embarrassed. I seen Tom Chambers dunk on Charles Barkley so hard one game, man, it was crazy. Mark Price, I seen like Mark Price used to stop on a dime and pull up for that jumper. He did it in college and he did it at the NBA level. Mark Price could be running at full speed and then stop on a dime and just drain that jumper and shooting the threes. Mark Price was bad. Bobby Jones was, had an all-around game known for dunking on people. Kurt Rambis just was a tough dude. So different people just, like they're different people respect their game because they earn that respect. They put in that work. And so we used to talk about anybody who can ball, anybody who can ball where, you know what I mean, you would come up in conversations. The first time I seen Tom Chambers was he put his knee in Charles Barkley's chest, man, and just dunked it with two on a fast break. I don't know if Kevin Johnson was in Phoenix then or not. And I was like, God damn, who the hell? Tom Chambers was a bad dude. He was a bad dude. So I can understand why Magic, like why Magic would hold Larry Bird in such high regard because, like I said, Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, like their careers is like connected at the hip. You can't bring up Magic Johnson without talking about Larry Bird, and you can't bring up Larry Bird without talking about Magic Johnson. They had some epic battles, like those championship when the Celtics and the Lakers made it to the championship at the man. I don't know what the ratings was, or I don't know nobody who wasn't watching those games when that was the first East Coast West Coast battle. Forget rap. That was the first East Coast West Coast battle, man, because the two fan bases was just polar opposites. You had Showtime, Magic Johnson, Showtime on the West Coast, and then you had Larry Bird, that blue collar type mentality, man, just come with his lunch pail and go to work on you. And those two guys in those championship games, man, they just clashed. And those championships was they was just epic for real. It was, and really the rivalry between Magic and Bird is what really, in my opinion, like helped the league really grow. And they took the NBA to a next level and just set it up for Mike to run the table. They set it up and Mike ran the table. But yeah, man, you can't talk about Bird without talking about Magic, and you can't talk about Magic without talking about Bird. So I can see why these guys just hold each other in high regards, because it's not like Magic just dominated Bird, and it's not like Bird just dominated Magic. Like Magic got 5 rings, Bird got 3, so you can't really, like talk down or look down on either one of them because both of these guys put in that work. But I just wanted to give some props to some other guys that was in the league And I probably didn't mention, it's probably some more guys, some white guys that was ballers back in the day. But those are the ones that I can recall that I used to follow, especially Mark Jackson. I used to really dig Mark Jackson when he was at Georgia Tech. Like I said, I followed Mark Jackson. I became aware of Tom Chambers and Bobby Jones like later on, when I started watching NBA. But first, I used to watch college before I watched the NBA. That was more exciting to me. But yeah, man, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think about Larry Bird, and the respect that he gets. And let me know if any other players that y'all know of, like any white guys that was showing up putting that work in, and people respect them. Like I said, if you can ball, people respect you. It don't even matter. So with that being said, y'all make sure to like and subscribe. Also, don't forget to leave a comment. And I will check you all out in the next episode. Peace.